familia, and welcome to another episode of Fire and Butterflies, where vulnerability meets authenticity, where courage meets love, and where fire meets butterflies. And I'm your host, Comadre Cristal, and I am going to talk about an interesting topic that I didn't think I was going to talk about it so soon, but it honestly it's all timing, and so it's coming out beautifully this week because, as you all know, I've been talking about Women History Month this whole month and the importance of women in our lives and the importance of strong women and how the more we empower each other, the more we empower ourselves, and how that all continues to really help raise the vibration as a whole of today's world. So one thing that came up a lot, especially after last week's episode, and I've seen this pattern so many times in my whole life, both professionally, personally. It's always been a subject of conversation amongst all my friends, all my female friends, including my friends who don't identify as females, or just it affects everyone. It affects everyone. The majority of it, though, does truly affect women. And again, it's because I see this and I myself experience it. And it's the dreaded imposter syndrome. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, that bitch. We're going to talk about imposter syndrome today. We're going to talk about how imposter syndrome can affect everyone in a different way because there's all kinds of different ways of imposter syndrome tends to show up. We're going to talk about a little bit of how I've managed my own imposter syndrome and how I continue to manage it on a daily basis because, again, I'm not perfect. I still have it. So, if you're interested, this is what today's topic is going to be about. So, let's dive right in. So, let's define imposter syndrome because I think that's the best way to first start off with the definition because everyone defines it differently. So, I want to say it like this. Let's think of it this way. Imposter syndrome is I'll describe mine because I can't I don't want to project to everyone like this is what imposter syndrome's like because it's not like it's different. So this is my imposter syndrome. It's that little voice in the back of your head that makes you doubt everything you do. It's that little voice in the back of your head that says, you're not good enough. No one loves you. You're not worthy of this. You're not valuable. It's that part in your head that can say, no one likes you. It's that voice that can also say, you don't deserve this. You didn't work hard enough for this. You need to work harder for you to really gain something out of it. Um, yeah, so if that sounds familiar, it's imposter syndrome. There's also other things that come out from it. I mean, there's lots of studies out there, and there's lots of books that you can absolutely read into about imposter syndrome, and and it's a topic that a lot of people don't talk about. Well, at least not used to talk about. I and so what I just described was a little bit of my own imposter syndrome. For other people, it does come out as I believe there's an author, and I will put it in the description because I don't want to butcher their name and I don't want to butcher the name of the book. But there is an author who devised the four P's of imposter syndrome, which is people pleasing, the perfectionism. You see, I'm already messing up because I'm forgetting the other two. As you see, those top two are the ones I know because I am a perfectionist and a people pleaser at my core. Like it's just a part of who I am based on my life, my upbringing, and it's just it's something that have been learning to work through. So that's why I'm very familiar with those two. But I know that there's another two because there's four P's. But either way, uh, and so it does show up differently for a lot of people. Imposter syndrome can okay, there it is. Ah, Thank you all for bearing with me. I love how I just like randomly will remember. So we have the 4 Ps. We have people pleasing, perfectionism, paralysis, aka procrastination, um, and oh, no, those are the 2, paralysis and procrastination. Because paralysis is literally when you just you just stop. For a lot of people, it can look like someone who's doing this task and then they just stop doing it. Like all of a sudden they're like, I don't want to do it anymore. It's like the people who tend to lose interest on things pretty quickly. That's part of imposter syndrome. And the procrastination, which is the, oh, I'll do it later. Oh, I'll do it later. Oh, I'll do it later. Or, you just can't seem to ever like really maneuver through it. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that there's also a lot of other layers to this. So I am not saying procrastination is part of, or not just procrastination, but paralysis, people pleasing, and perfectionism is just imposter syndrome. But I really do feel like it plays a huge role. Imposter syndrome plays a huge role in these 4 qualities of people. Because trust me, the people pleasing it for me is not just the imposter syndrome. There's lots of layers there of people pleasing, and we'll talk all about them throughout these podcast shows. I promise. But anyways, going back to that. So knowing and being aware of imposter syndrome and the way it shows up in your life can really help in determining, oh, like this is my imposter syndrome. What can I do? This is the imposter in me because you're not an imposter. No one's an imposter. And yet there's somewhere in our lives that either someone told us or it's an upbringing, uh, ancestral trauma. Like there's just so many, like, so that's why I'm saying, like, there's so many layers there. Um, and so that's how I'm gonna define imposter syndrome. And for this podcast episode, again, do your own research. I highly always recommend that people do what feels right for you. Like, don't ever take anyone's word for it. Like, yeah, that's what it is. Do your own research. Find out what it means to you. Maybe he's never been called imposter syndrome. Maybe you call it something else. Doesn't matter. We're going to talk about that part in in us, in a lot of women I've worked with, a lot of women that I connect with, myself included, and how imposter syndrome really stops us from living our best life, from really tapping into our power, tapping into who we are at our core. And I'm gonna, yeah. So there's your definition. So I want to begin with the first time I heard about imposter syndrome because I've always known about these things, like, the negative mindset, the those parts in you that don't feel good enough. Like that was part of my life my whole life. Like I always felt like that. Um I didn't know there was an actual term for it until I would say during college was the first time I learned about it in a psychology class. Um, I want to say that's when I did first hear of it. I also majored in sociology in school, so it came up a lot in those kind of conversations too with professors and everything. But it was an interesting concept for me to hear about imposter syndrome, about this syndrome that truly convinces us that we are not worthy or we're not good enough or whatever it is. And it was interesting when I first heard that because I think that was the first time I was able to put a name to something that I felt and I just could never understand because I mean at this point I'm in college, so I was already going to therapy for a few years in, and I just never understood how to explain to my therapist how I felt, until I heard the word imposter syndrome, and I'm like, "That's it. That's what I have." Like, that's what I have. But it wasn't that I have, like, so it's interesting because as I've learned more about imposter syndrome and as I have seen it show and rear its ugly face in my professional life, in my personal life, I have really been able to hone in on it when it is imposter syndrome. So, one of the things that really helped guide me in learning more about my imposter syndrome was really being able to take a look at myself, the shadow part of me. That's what a lot of people call it, shadow part. When they say the shadow work, ego work. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways of calling it. And for me, it was I wanted to heal. Literally, it's like I just want to heal. I just want to be I just want to be better. And so that didn't happen for me until many years after college when I was in my workplace or a previous workplace where I mentioned in the previous episode, I worked for 10 years in the field of domestic violence, sexual assault, and recently human trafficking. And and I really got to see how imposter syndrome affected not just my myself, but I really saw the impact on the people that I worked with, my clients, as a case manager at that time. And then as I grew and other positions I held in that agency, I really saw how imposter syndrome showed up in a lot of people's lives. And then I really saw how it also showed up in my colleagues' lives, and, like my friends and people I connected with. Because as I said this before, like I've been blessed and fortunate to have so many amazing people always surrounding me, and and the conversations that I would have with these amazing people, sometimes the things they would tell me about themselves and the way they saw themselves, and I'm just like, but you're just so amazing. What's going on? And so that's when I really started to see how imposter syndrome shows up in our daily lives. And and it wasn't full blown imposter syndrome the way for me it has showed up in college. It was kind of like a subtle, like that little, um if I would compliment someone, the little thanks. Like, they don't even like believe the compliment. Like it's those kind of subtle reactions that I really saw a lot, especially working with in the peer support groups that I would run. I would see that a lot because it would be women. And again, remember, as I said this, domestic violence does not just affect women. And I will know always say this time and time again, it affects everyone, regardless of your skin color, regardless of your economic status, regardless of your gender, regardless of your sex, regardless of anything. Domestic violence affects everyone. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. Uh, the majority of the clients that would walk through those doors were typically female. So I'm always going to be using female pronouns, but please remember this. This affects regardless of it regards everyone. So anyways, with a lot of the women that I was working with in these support groups, I really saw how they would come in belittled and not feeling enough or worthy enough. And after a few weeks in the group, some for some, everyone's on a different path. Some would come out of their shell and express themselves more. Others still remained, but you could still see a little glimmer coming out. Um, And yet, anytime it was a session of compliments or love or taking care of ourselves, it was so hard to see how it was hard for people to accept compliment or for people to accept that they were worthy. Um, Eventually, we'd get there, but it was just a lot. It was a lot to see and witness and experience this. And so that was when I really knew that imposter syndrome was not just like this sickness or like the word syndrome. That's when I started to realize we should name it something else because imposter syndrome doesn't just it's weird. It's weird, but that's how I learned about it and that's how I've always used it. Fast forward, as I worked in the agency for many years, and the more I got to see my own imposter syndrome, because again, it was and the way it would show up for me was very similar to how I'd seen it show up for my friends or my clients. Was someone would say, "Oh, that was great, Crystal," and I'd be like, "Oh," like I would. overthink it. Like, is that compliment? Did they mean it? What do they want from me? What are they doing? Are they gonna like? It's like I couldn't. If someone gave me a compliment, it took me so much to accept, acknowledge, and just move on with my day. I would fester even on a compliment, everyone. Like that's how um bad my imposter syndrome was for me. Like I if someone gave me a compliment, automatically would think they're being too kind, they're being too nice. Or is it because they need something? What's going on? Like, can I trust them? It was very unhealthy. Very unhealthy. And but this is how I had been dealing with life for so long at this point that I didn't know that it wasn't healthy. I hope that's making sense. Um, and then I I mean, I managed it as well as I could. It's funny because when a lot of people, especially people who personally know me, and I talk about imposter syndrome, they they will it's like the most sweetest, kindest thing I hear, but at the same time, it makes me feel more of an imposter. This is why. Because when people would compliment me, because I've been talking about imposter syndrome for so long, and my colleagues would always say, "Wow, like that was great, like you're doing so good," um, and I would have a hard time, but I was always very open, and I'd be like, "Oh, thank you, like this is really hard for me to hear, but I appreciate it," and they were like, "Crystal, but you seem so confident, blah blah blah." I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm dying in the inside." Yeah, I look confident. I look great on the outside, but inside I'm dying. I just want to go crawl up and hide. Um, and people were like, "What? That's you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, just really good at faking it." Because that was one of my survival skills that I had learned from a very young age was to fake it. I had to learn how to fake a smile, fake my happiness. Because in the inside, I was dying. I was miserable. I didn't, it was just, ugh. But I knew that no one liked misery. Like, you know, how there's a thing that says misery likes company. I also knew that I didn't like, people weren't going to want to be with miserable Cristal. So I faked it. I pretended. Um, and I mean, I did that my whole like, I literally my whole life was just like that, because growing up in an alcoholic household and growing up with an alcoholic father, I knew that that was growing up. I remember that was something that we just didn't talk about. It was like a taboo. It was taboo to talk about the abuse that was going on at home. It was taboo to talk about um, what was happening at home, and so it it yeah, it was just that contributed a lot to me always having to pretend and to fake, because I didn't want people to know. I didn't want people to know that what was going on at my home. And so I that's how I grew up. I it just became so natural to me. And I'm not saying that I was a fake person because I wasn't fake. My emotions were fake, if that makes sense. Like I still was genuine and sincere in who I am, and I've always been like that. I just think what I'm talking about was my emotions and being fake. And when I was sad, no one knew I was sad. If I was miserable, no one knew I was miserable. If I was struggling and like no one knew about it because I had learned so well to cover all that up and to swallow that. But the more that's the thing that the more I swallowed my emotions and the more I swallowed my anger and my sadness and all of those horrible things, even the thoughts I had about myself, the more I swallowed them, the more I believed them and the more I felt like that. And that was when I had my I wouldn't it was one of my rock bottoms, I would say. It really was one of my rock bottoms. And that was when I was already I was already working at my previous workplace. I was fairly new there. I would say I was 25. Yeah, because I started working there when I was 24. So I was 25, 26. And I was already there for in the agency for a couple of years. And I just knew that something was off. Something wasn't right with me. I wasn't, especially because working with victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, like the vicarious trauma that they had, like I would carry their trauma. But not just that, like I would also, the imposter in me would think, who am I to be preaching to these people to take care of themselves when I'm not even doing it myself? Kind of thing would come up. Or if they are talking about their relationships being unhealthy, but I keep finding my own self in unhealthy relationships. Like what's going on? Like what is happening here? So that was when I knew that something needed to shift and something needed to change. And so I went back to therapy because at that point like therapy was really what I believed in for a lot of the support in my mental health was going to therapy. um at that point I still did not have the relationship I have now with a higher power. That didn't come until much later, but therapy was my go-to, and so I started really immersing myself into therapy. That's when my imposter syndrome conversations would come up again in my therapy appointments, and just really diving in deeper and figuring out who I was. And everything seemed fairly well. Like the more I was aware of it, the more I could challenge it, the more I could maneuver. And that's how I continued on with my imposter syndrome. It was kind of like I will be blunt. It felt like I was just putting a band-aid over my wounds. Really, that's really what it felt like, because the wounds were still bleeding, and so I would just go and change the bandage and put another Band-Aid on and then go on my merry way, and then the wound would start bleeding again. Um, Very graphic, I know, but that's how I see it. Uh, I really, really got to see my imposter syndrome resurface during the pandemic, during 2020. Um, and it's so interesting because actually, if you talk to a lot of people, especially people who are on a healing journey or on a spiritual healing journey, a lot of them will say, and it's true, like during 2020, there was a huge shift energetically with everyone. Like there was just a lot that happened that year. And that was when I mean, I know energetically that there was a shift, so that's when I like a lot of things started making sense to me. But for me, it was also like I think there was a point where there was a lot of time on my hands. So that gave me a lot of time to think. And that got me a lot of time to process my life and what was happening, what was going on, what I wanted, who I was, those kind of things. Like that happened during 2020. And I was newly married, because my ex-husband and I got married in 2019. So I was newly married. Had been doing the healing on my own with therapy for at this point for quite some time. And I was managing fairly well. Like, in hindsight, I was happy. I really was. Like I genuinely was in a place where I was happy, like bright future ahead, all these great things were happening. Um it wasn't until and I'm not gonna go into too deep because this, like I said, this will be a full on episode on its own. But it was when I realized I was going to be a parent. I was going to be a mom. That was when I had a moment of I need to do I need to do bigger work. I need to go in deeper because no, I can't do this. I can't be a mom. Like I cannot be a mom. I'm not ready to be a mom. Um Yeah. So we'll go on a whole episode about that. But that was when I was adamant of like I need to really hone in on these issues that I'm having because I need to better myself and I don't know where to start. So let's go. And Yeah, that's really when I started to do my shadow work or my ego work, or really going in deeper, inner child healing, like whatever you want to call it. Like it's when you do all of that. And that really started at the end of 2022, right after my friend also passed, Lynette, the one that I've been sharing so much about. After her passing was really, and she died in at the end of 2020. And so that's when I really hone in and knew that I needed to change. Fast forward to through all of that because I went through a lot. I mean, from 2020 to right now, 2024. I even think about it right now. I'm like, it's only been 4 years. Holy shit! And how much my life has changed in 4 years. It's a trip. It's a trip. But the imposter syndrome was something that I knew I needed to deal with because here's the thing. The one thing that I was adamant and genuine about because I knew I had imposter syndrome, but a lot of people didn't understand that I did because again, I'd always come off as this super confident, super great person but in the inside, it wasn't my inside was not matching my outside. But no one knew what was going on the inside because I didn't open up. I didn't share, I didn't talk, I didn't. I just sucked it in and held it in. Now, don't get me wrong. I had my really close friends that I did talk to and I did have support people and it wasn't like I was always just suffering alone and I don't want to come across like that because I also learned at a very young age, once I started going to therapy, that I needed people I could talk to and trust. Um, but the imposter syndrome was something that I really wanted to tackle because I wanted to be happy, genuinely happy. I wanted to be happy with myself entirely. Um, I wanted to be able to have someone give me a compliment and for me to accept it fully without me second guessing it or doubting it or asking myself, is that like, do they really mean that? Do they like, I just wanted to be true and genuine to myself. Like, that's all I wanted. Like, that was my goal that I was envisioning once I started to really dive into deeper into my healing journey. And boy, did it come. It came and it wasn't pretty. It wasn't easy. It was hard learning to manage my imposter syndrome has been oh and to this day it's still a challenge. It's not like it's gone away. Because now that I'm doing this work, I have now seen that my imposter syndrome is really just my ego. Like it's they go hand in hand. So you're gonna start seeing that now. I'm gonna shift the wording to ego because really imposter syndrome is it's it's there, but deep down it's all part of our own healing. In order for us to heal, we have to like go through that and it's hard, it's hard. Um, and I really started to see how imposter syndrome was affecting my life, how my ego was affecting my life in everything, not just my life internally, but my relationship with my ex-husband, my relationship with my coworkers, my relationship with my kiddos, because then we got placed with kids, and then I was like, oh shit, now I really am a mom. And it's like, oh my gosh, this I was not ready for any of this. And for the record, and I hear this all the time from other parents and other moms. You're never ready to be a mom. You're never ready to be a dad. You're not like there's and how you define ready. It's very different for everyone, but really like no nothing and no one prepares you for parenthood the way real life experience just does it for you. You could read as much as you want to read. You can get trained as much as you want to get trained. You can do everything you want to do, trust me, to prepare and get ready to have a kid. Nothing prepares you the way it does to actually have the kid, your baby, your child. Um, and that was really when my imposter syndrome again was in the full blown surface because now to the added layers of not feeling good enough, not feeling like a good enough employee, not feeling like a good enough wife. Now I don't feel like a good enough mother. So there was just like all of these added layers of just me never feeling good enough. And that's why I knew I needed to do something differently because I could not carry on living with that feeling of not feeling good enough. It was just exhausting. It was tiresome. And I was tired of pretending and I was tired of faking it. I was tired of faking a smile just to get through the day. I was tired of I just wanted to retreat and hide away from everyone and everything because that's how tired I was. I was tired of having to be Little Miss Perfect. I was tired of having all of these expectations that no one else put on me, but I had put on myself. And so I knew I needed to change. I knew that I needed to do something differently. And so that's really when I took my deep dive into my healing journey. And that was 3 years ago. And, and, uh, to this day, I mean, it's only been 3 years since I've really like taken this deep dive. And there's days where it's easy, and then there's days where it's motherfucking hard. It's so fucking hard. But those are the days that it's the hardest. Those are the days you really need to step up and you really need to show up for yourself because those are the days that if you don't, it, they add up, and then at least my experience, I go right back to the same pattern. And and so I'm gonna give you. I'm now gatekeeper. I don't believe in keep hoarding all this information. That's what this podcast is for, as a purpose of education. So I'm going to give you my secrets of how I got through my imposter syndrome. Um, Therapy is the one thing I will always, always, always be an advocate for therapy. Now, I know I'm a spiritual life coach, and people are like, "Coach, like you what?" Like, no, two separate things. And I truly believe that it's all about finding the right therapists. I've had so many therapists. Trust me, I have experienced all kinds of therapy. I've experienced all kinds of different kinds of therapists. And not every shoe fits. And that's the one thing about therapy that if I could go back to 18-year-old me who started therapy and give her some tips and tell her like, "Hey, this is what you're going to just do this and you'll be fine." This is what I would tell her. Do not be shy to interview a therapist once you first start with them. Before you even start, do ask for a consultation. Interview them. Ask them what their beliefs are when it comes to mental health and not necessarily mental health, but like, have you worked with people who have X, Y, and Z? Or, what is your experience with abuse or alcohol or whatever it is? Because my experience, what I have found, the therapist I currently have right now, I have found that for me, it helps me to have a therapist that has the same values that I have. I mean, and I'm not talking about going in deep and figuring out what are their like those kind of values, but I'm talking about the values that you hold close to your heart. So for me, I need to make sure that my therapist is LGBTQIA friendly. I do not identify as that amazing community. I don't. Like, but I am a strong ally. And and if someone from this amazing community cannot go to that therapist because they don't feel safe, best believe I'm not going to go to that therapist because that is how we support. That's how allyship works. You support your community by being an ally and by supporting the same people that that will support them. So that was one value that I needed to hold close to my heart because I hold the LGBTQIA community very close to my heart. And I will go deeper into that in many episodes, but that was one of my values. Like I needed this person to be LGBTQIA. So best believe I asked them. I did flat out ask them in my interviews because before I found my therapist, I interviewed every single one of them. Because it's like, I'm going to pay you. You're not paying me. I am paying you. So I need to make sure that you're going to work with me because if not, I'm not paying you. I Therapy's expensive. I wanna make sure I know where my money's going towards. So, that's like so those kind of values are the ones I'm talking about. Whatever you hold dear to your heart, whatever values are yours, like, that's something that if I could go back and talk to younger me about finding a therapist, because that is a therapist that you are gonna be able to open up with and feel closer to and be able to open up because therapy can only work if you do the work. No one is going to heal you. I say this and I say this all the time. I said this even when I was working as a case manager in the field. No one is going to heal you. No one is going to save you. You got to do the work. Yes, there's people there who are going to guide you and mentor you and give you tools, but no one's going to do the work for you. You got to do the work. That was like the very first thing I learned in working in the field as a case manager. Do not work harder than your client because then you're not empowering them. You're taking away their power when you're doing all the work for them. Like it's about empowerment. So you see how empowering starts stepping in, where I was like, I'm not empowering my clients when I don't even empower myself because I'm not doing any of the work on me because I'm busy being Captain Save-A-Ho and trying to save everyone. Yeah. That is like that's when I started to really see, "Oh, I need to save my own ass." Like, that's the only way I'm gonna heal, and that's the only way I can help others heal, because I'm not healing them, they heal themselves, and so it really started like that. So, therapy. I found a therapist, and I was really able to work on that and be able to manage and maneuver through that. Shadow work. Shadow work is so important. If you don't know what shadow work is, that's okay. Find it. Look for it. Like and everyone calls it differently. Some people, I mean, you can consider shadow work your inner child healing because you're going in deep. Shadow work can also be doing ego work, so really being able to differentiate between your ego and your intuition. Shadow work is also taking a look at who you are as a person and really figuring out what triggers you. Like it's really all about looking at all of those dark, ugly sides that you don't want to deal with. That's shadow work. So that's really like doing that healing. And so that was one thing. And then the other one, the third one that a lot of people don't really talk about this being, at least for me, it was a very, very important part of my healing journey, especially with my imposter syndrome, was taking care of myself, was self-care. No one taught me how to take care of myself because I took care of everyone, and it didn't dawn on me how much lack of self-care I had because I didn't I genuinely thought me taking care of others was taking care of me, and it wasn't. And that was like a really interesting thing to learn, especially again working in the field for so long that I did, because in the field we always talked about self-care, 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 because we are listening, we are creating space to listen to other people's trauma. So if we don't take care of ourselves, we are going to carry their trauma. Like that's vicarious trauma and it's very real. And so I started to realize I need to take care of me. Like I need to take care of me, and that went into a whole thing because then I had to learn what that looked like, and then I had to figure out what that meant, and then I had to set boundaries, and then talking about that I had to learn how to set boundaries. So, self-care, it's very important. learning about it. The more you learn, the more easier it does get. Um, and and it's been it's been a lifesaver taking care of myself, listening to my needs and my wants, and being able to set those boundaries for myself. Another thing that has really helped me nip my imposter syndrome, and not nip like as in cut it out, because again, now that I associate my imposter syndrome with my ego, I am very well aware, like, my ego's never gonna go away. Like, it's not. Like, it's a part of who I am, it's a part of my life. It's my shadow side of me. Now it's learning about how to maneuver through that. So, the next step really is to learn how to live with these parts of you. It's learning to know how that this part of you is never gonna go away. So how do you manage it? How do you work with it? How do you maneuver through life with these things? And a lot of it for me was, again, just being the more aware of it, the more I could nip it in the butt, and the more that I could move forward. But the thing is that a lot of it is, and this is where a lot of people in my experience, and I don't want to say the word fail because they don't fail, but this is where they fall short. That, yeah, I'll say that. This is where a lot of people fall short. My experience of seeing it is when we stop because it's too hard or too scary, or or we're not seeing the change fast enough, or eh, it's this part, because we have to go through the discomfort, and people don't like being uncomfortable. I mean, that's the whole point. Comfortability is, that's why we don't change it, because if we change it, then we're not comfortable, and no one likes being uncomfortable. No one likes the discomfort. This is the part where if you don't push yourself out of your comfort zone, you're never going to challenge your imposter syndrome. There, I said it because it's true. If you do not put yourself out of your comfort zone, your imposter syndrome is what's keeping you there. You got to push through. The discomfort will help you grow. And that was really when I started to realize, ah, healing means growing, and growing means getting myself out of my out of my comfort zone. And getting myself out of my comfort zone is really going to trigger the shit out of me. And boy did it. And boy did it. And so really being able to do this now, now 3 years later, here I am as a spiritual life coach talking to all of you amazing people out there about imposter syndrome. But it's because we have to push ourselves through this. Like, it's like there's this, because if we don't, nothing changes. Um and I learned that because I'm also very well aware, and I've seen it, and I've experienced it, how the cycle will continue even if it changes. Here, bear with me. So I'll use this as an example because I would see this a lot with my clients working in the agency, and then I experienced it myself. Full circle. I would have clients who would talk to me, and would share that they kept seeing the pattern. They kept dating the same man, different person, but same, like, it was, like, the same. It was almost like new name, different face, but same person. Like, it was that kind of seeing, like, they were seeing patterns. There were patterns there. And it was because, again, that discomfort, we're comfortable in trauma. And I hate, and again, I'm not saying that, uh, I should give a trigger warning to anyone, like, this podcast, you might not like the things I have to say. Because, yeah, we get comfortable. And a survivor who is in survival mode is going to do whatever it takes to stay comfortable, because that's familiar. Familiar is what's keeping us safe. That's what our ego aka our imposter syndrome, is making us believe. It's again that voice in the back of your head that I said earlier, you're not good enough. No one's going to love you. Might as well settle. Like you're fine. This is they love you. Deep down in there, they love you. They do. They do. And so I saw this a lot with, it was like the repeating, but it was because what they were not seeing was that they deserved more and they deserved better. But you don't know that when you don't believe it. And so I started to see that in my own personal life. Um, and it was because even after my ex-husband and I were separated, and I shared about this in one of the episodes, I briefly started dating. And even in my dating, like I was seeing like different persons, different people, and they all kept having a similar thing. And I'm like, oh my God, Cristal, like, girl, you gotta stop, or else you're repeating the same thing. You are repeating cycles. You are repeating the same stuff. You no, you're not ready to start dating because you still have work to do. Is literally what I remember telling myself. And so I went in deep, and that's when I really went into another part, the next phase of my working with my imposter syndrome. And that was when I really started to dig in deeper with my inner child, because what I didn't realize was that a lot of these beliefs about myself started from childhood. And so inner child healing really took my shadow work into a deeper level for me. And so that's the next step. That's the next tip that I give for everyone. Make sure you do that inner child healing, because that narrative that you're telling yourself, that thing that you're like, whatever it is, that belief, other people's baggage, it came from somewhere. It didn't just pop into your head one day and be like, I don't feel good enough today. It doesn't work that way. Like somewhere, somewhere. And it's not always traumatic. Like, there was also this belief that because I would, with a lot of the clients I would work with, especially because as I said, domestic violence affects everyone. I would have clients who I remembered, they were like, I had the perfect childhood. I had perfect life. Like, why me? What am I doing? What's going on? But it's not about having a perfect childhood. It's about in our childhood, because everyone will experience this. As a child, we are experiencing life and we're learning and we're growing. So even if you have a perfect childhood at home, how was school? How did people react to you? How did you learn? How did you grow? Like what? Because it starts, it just takes one comment. One comment. It takes one comment for it to just go into our subconscious, and it stays there and it lingers. And then it's like added layer, added layer, added layer, added layer. And next thing you know, it's a full blown thing. And you're like, I had no idea that's like, so that's why inner child healing is really important, because it's not just about inner child healing is not just about your childhood at your home. It's inviting you to look at your childhood, look at your teenage years, look at any part of your life where someone else dumped their negative narrative onto you. It could have been a passing by. It could tra- trauma is different for everyone. And so that's really when I started to do a lot deeper work when it came to my imposter syndrome, was really going down to my inner child. Now, how am I dealing with imposter syndrome? It's pushing myself through it, being aware when I have and also being open to compliments and receiving. So, I'll share that perfect example I'll use is this podcast in itself. I I've been wanting to do a podcast for years. 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 I've been wanting to do a podcast. I've always wanted to do a podcast. It was something that I don't know what it was about podcasting. I don't know what it was about having a microphone in front of you. Like I just always loved the idea of it. But I never did it because in the back of my head was always like, who's going to want to hear me talk? What am I going to talk about? And blah blah blah. Like all of those cognitive distortions or imposter syndrome, aka ego. Call it, at this point, you know what I'm calling it. And I never did. When I started to maneuver from or transition, I maneuver. When I started to transition from being employed at my agency to being a full-time entrepreneur at Love Your Nauco Madre, the idea of a podcast came back up. And again, I was like, I don't have time right now. But once I start working full time as Love Your Nauco Madre, I'll make a podcast. I'll do it. I'll do it. No big deal. That's okay. I got this. I'll do it. Wow. January 6th came and went. January 12th, January 24th. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, and the podcast never came. And it was always excuse after excuse in my head. Oh, well, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to make a podcast about? Like, I'm just not going to do it. So I never did the podcast. I never did it until finally I had like this um, download or whatever you want to call it. Cause I had a moment with spirit and I was like, Spirit, I need help. I feel stuck. I know I feel stuck and I don't know what my next steps are. As you've been following me at this point for some time, you should know that I have a lot of conversations with spirit. I just talk to God all the time. And so I was asking for help. And the help came, and it came through another group that I was a part of. Um, and it really was about reminding me because all they did, nothing. They I didn't learn anything differently. I was reminded that my imposter syndrome was there and I had to kick it in the butt the way I have done it always before, which all the steps I just told you, which talking about it. So I found a therapist. I also have worked with life coaches before. So I talk about it. Like it for me, if I take away the power of my imposter, like if I take its power away and give it back to myself, and that is by me speaking up for myself and being true to myself and being authentic and vulnerable and telling people, yes, I have imposter syndrome. Yes, I'm scared shitless. Yes, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but I'm still doing it anyway. Like there is power there. There's power when you speak up to it, when you speak into it, when you speak it and then just say, but I'm not going to let take power over me. So that's why therapy for me has helped. Whatever works for you. Talk therapy. You get what I'm saying. If you have friends, do friends. Um, but so I was like, oh, I need to make sure I talk about this in my therapy sessions. I need to expose myself more. And then I was reminded of taking care of myself through all of it. Always love on myself and take care of myself and be gentle to myself because I'm not perfect and that's okay to not be perfect. Because that was another thing that I had learned was with my perfectionism was that when I was imperfect, I was the one beating myself up. I was the one being mean to myself. No one else was being mean to me. I was the one who was being mean to me. And so it was like, again, that mindset of like, I get to be perfect. No one is perfect. No one's perfect. And so I was like, okay, remind myself again about that. And then right back to the shadow work. Let's dig in deep. Where is this coming from? Where did this fester? What happened? What's going on? And then, like, it's a daily, a constant, all the time. I am not coming to here to all of you telling you, oh, yeah, my imposter syndrome, I got that shit under control. No, I don't. I don't. It took me, and it still to this day takes me a lot. Even recording this episode, like, literally, so I learned that I remembered that. So remember stepping out of your comfort zone, just fucking do the recording. I remember telling myself, just fucking do the recording, Cristal. That's all you gotta do. Just fucking do the recording. However it comes out, you send it out and that's it. You started your podcast. And here we are, 6 episodes later. But even today, even for me to record this episode, I had to go through a whole thing right now because I don't know what happened. Um, there's times like today what happened was I didn't know what to talk about. Like I knew that I wanted to talk about um imposter syndrome because I knew that if that was something that came up after last week was with I've had people reach out to me and tell me that was a podcast episode. And there was something inside of me who didn't believe them. Go figure. And so I started thinking, oh my God, Cristal, you're letting your imposter syndrome get the best of you again. What's going on? What's happening? And so that means I do it. I go in, do the work. And so I was like, okay, I got to talk about imposter syndrome in this episode today. I have to. Yes, let's talk about it. And I came, started going to do the recording. My camera's not working. And I was like, oh, right away, I was going to say, oh, camera's not working. That's okay. I'm not going to do the recording. Maybe it's a sign that I don't need to do the recording. Uh, and there was something in me that said, nope, you are committed. You are determined. You set the intention that you want to do a podcast episode. All you had to do is show up. Use your camera. And I was like, okay, God, I'll use my camera. So I'm honestly using my phone as the camera to do the recording for this. Or, for those of you who watch my podcast, who watch it, or if you're listening, it doesn't phase you. But nonetheless, like that was imposter syndrome at work right there. It was already trying to convince me not to do this episode because who am I to talk about imposter syndrome? Who am I to tell the world like how to like literally it's all these things in my head. But I got to shut them down because it's like, no, bitch. I've worked with my imposter syndrome. I have been working on a daily basis to get this bitch to shut the fuck up. As you see, I'm kind of passionate about this. And so I was like, I'm going to record this, damn it, because I'm going to. And here I am recording it, talking about it. But that's what I mean about imposter syndrome. It just likes to show its ugly face and whisper little things in your ear. And out of comfort, we do it because it is. I am sitting here recording this uncomfortable because I am talking about a part of me that I don't like people to know about. I don't like people knowing that I've had to fake smiles. I don't like people knowing that I've been in a place in my life where I pretended to be happy. Like, no, I don't want people to know that. But it's important for them to know that because again, it's showing me that that doesn't define me. Those are parts of my life that does not mean that's who I am. It's parts of my life that have happened to me but now I am sincere and now I am genuine and I can still show up on my podcast or anywhere in life as a one-on-one as a spiritual life coach or my comadreando group sessions or in any place of wherever I go. I get to show up authentically and I get to show up uh, fully as who I am and accept it and have like zero fucks to give because it's who I am. I have not been doing all this work to go back to not believing in myself because I've been there and I don't want to not believe in myself. Like it's not worth it. So, imposter syndrome, it's a real thing. It's there. And if we don't deal with our ego or deal with the shadow work or deal with our inner selves, like we this is where the cycle continues and it goes on and on and on. And that's why we catch ourselves repeating the same stuff, repeating the same things. It's because we're not dealing with that part. And I cannot let my imposter syndrome get the best of me again. Because there were multiple times in my life where I did let my ego get the best of me, and I would go into this um, ugly parts of me, and I don't like that, and no one deserves that. And so I really, if anything, this is like the biggest takeaway that I want everyone to go with, especially if you feel like you are dealing with an imposter syndrome, if you feel like you're dealing with your ego way too much, if you feel like you're not good enough, if you feel like it's hard for you to accept a compliment, I want you to know this. I want you to know that you are amazing. Even if you don't believe it, even if deep inside, it is so hard for you to accept a compliment from a complete stranger, especially from me. If you're just like, you don't know me, you don't know anything about me, you're right, I don't. The one thing I do know is that you're still a human being. And that alone, period, is why you are amazing. Because you are here, you were brought onto this earth, you were brought into this world, and and that's it, the period. You don't need to explain yourself to anyone. You don't need to show your value. Like, no, that is alone, period, is the fact that you're here. That means you're valuable. That means you're valuable. And I really want you to know that when life is hard, when life is just one thing after another, all you gotta go is to go within. Look for that fire in you. Look for whatever it is that's gonna help you transform, because you deserve it. You deserve to have the most purest, joyous happiness in the world. You truly do deserve it. It does not matter what you've done in your past. It does not matter what has been done to you. Like, you are still deserving. Because for so long, I carried this feeling like I was not deserving of anything because of all the bad things I had done, or all the things I did not do or could have done differently. Like, no. I've said this and I say this all the time. Life happens for you, not to you. And our imposter syndrome keeps us from really being who we are meant to be. And it's not worth it. It's not worth it. All right? Shine, be your authentic self, be who you are meant to be. And if you're struggling with that, I'm your girl here. Hit me up. I will happy I have oh my gosh, it's okay, fine. I will do this real quick because I really want to close out with this too. As a spiritual life coach, that is exactly my calling, is to give you the tools that I have learned in my 34 years of life, to really help you hone in on whatever your imposter syndrome is, or whatever you're telling yourself, or whatever is taking away your voice. I have the tools to help you, because these tools that I just gave you to you, these are just part of the many more tools that I have of unlocking your inner comadre, unlocking your intuition, unlocking that higher, best version of yourself. It's it's in there. They are in you. You got to find them. And I have the tools. So if you're interested, I actually have a free journal, 100%. Zero strings attached, free journal. You should go check out my website, uh, download my free journal, and start doing the work. Because that's all you have to do, is start doing the work. Just show up for yourself. Because remember, no one's gonna show up for you but you. You got to save yourself. All right. Um, I'll give you a website real quick because I don't know if everyone knows what my website is, but it's www.lyncomadre.com. So it's lincomadre.com. Uh, and again, if you find me on social media, love your now comadre. It's all the same handle everywhere, but find me. I will get you my journal, because it's all the tools I've learned and I've gained through all of this, like all of it. That's helped me live my life the way I'm living it now, which is authentically and myself and happy. This is I would say that I would dare say I'm daring saying that this is the happiest I've ever been in my whole life, because I'm being true to myself. That does not mean I'm always happy. I'm not always happy. Shit happens. Life happens. There's times I'm stressing out. I'm crying my eyes out. That does not mean I'm not happy. But I am genuinely happy, because after a good cry, I look around and I count my blessings and I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm happy. I am happy. I'm genuinely happy. And I want this happiness for you too. So that's why my journal's free. Go tap it into it. And if you want to work one on one, I'm here for you. But you deserve it. You deserve a good life. All right. Anyways, oh, that was my episode for today. Imposter syndrome. Go kick that bitch in the butt. Thank you all for listening. I love you all so much. I'm really excited. Next week is my birthday. Oh my god, I'm gonna be 35. But I'm gonna go into that. Next week episode is a very, very, very special one for me. I'm really excited because I am going to be doing the recording on my actual birthday. Um, and I will have someone very special with me on this episode. So I'm excited. I cannot wait. Thank you all who have been on this with me, because my imposter syndrome honestly had me believing that I wasn't worthy of doing a podcast. And here I am, 6 episodes in, still doing it. But, anyways, I love you all so much. And with all of that, I am sending you all so much fire and butterflies. And as always, don't forget, love you now. Bye.